I was halfway through my morning meeting when my phone buzzed against the glass table. At first, I ignored it. The last thing I needed was another distraction while discussing a six-figure deal. But when the notification flashed again, I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen.
Dad.
It had been months since I'd heard from him, and years since he'd texted anything that didn't sound transactional. My pulse quickened. I slid the phone closer, thumb trembling slightly as I unlocked the screen. "You're not invited. Only family."
That was all it said.
No greeting. No explanation. Just that one brutal sentence. For a moment, the world around me blurred. The hum of my office faded. My assistant's voice became static, and I felt that old, familiar ache rise in my chest. Only family. I stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of my downtown Chicago office, the skyline glinting in perfect irony. Family. The same people I once drained my entire savings for, $10,534 to help my brother move abroad, believing love would finally make me belong. I set the phone down gently, smoothing the silk sleeve of my ivory blouse as if composure could erase the sting. My reflection in the glass looked calm, confident, but inside, that text had split something open. They still saw me as the outsider, the extra piece that never quite fit the picture. I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Only family, huh?" I whispered under my breath. "Guess they still don't know who I really am." I was 24 the last time I lived under my father's roof. Back then, I was still the girl who tried too hard, ironing everyone's shirts before work, cooking Sunday breakfast, waiting for someone to notice the effort. My stepmother, Linda, never did. She'd glance over the pancakes and say, "You used too much syrup again," like kindness cost extra. And my brother, Ethan, her golden child, didn't even need to try. He could miss curfew, forget chores, fail 2 classes. Dad still called him my boy, the way he never called me my girl. When Ethan got the news, a job offer in London, the house buzzed like Christmas morning. Everyone cheered, plans were made, champagne popped open. Only I noticed the quiet detail that followed. Ethan didn't have enough to cover his relocation fees. That night, while they were celebrating downstairs, I sat on my bed, scrolling through my bank account. My savings, years of small paychecks from temp jobs, added up to $10,534. It was everything I had. I didn't even hesitate. The next morning, I transferred every cent to him. "Consider it a gift," I said, forcing a smile. Dad looked proud, but not of me. "You're doing what family does," he said. I remember nodding, even though something inside me cracked. 2 weeks later, Ethan boarded his flight. No one mentioned my name when they toasted at the airport. A month after that, when I asked Dad if he could co-sign my lease so I could move closer to work, he didn't even look up from his coffee. "I think you need to be more independent, Claire. We can't keep supporting you."
Supporting me.
The words tasted like acid. That night, I overheard Linda whispering through the hallway, her voice cold and sharp. "She's never going to make it on her own. She just wants attention." Something in me snapped. I went upstairs, packed my suitcase, and stood at my door one last time. My grandmother, Nora, caught me before I left. She pressed a small silver bracelet into my palm, delicate, engraved with the words "Grow quietly." Her eyes were soft. "Never measure your worth by who sees it, sweetheart," she said. "Build quietly, and the right people will notice." I walked out that night with trembling hands and a burning chest, but for the first time in my life, the weight lifting off my shoulders felt like freedom. Starting over wasn't poetic. It was survival. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a noisy diner in Milwaukee, the kind where the radiator clanked all night and the smell of fried onions never left your clothes. But it was mine. The first space that felt like I could breathe without being judged for how loud. My first job was at a logistics firm, answering phones and entering data for $12 an hour. I was terrible at it. My fingers shook every time my manager hovered nearby, afraid she'd see how unsure I was. But one afternoon, after a senior analyst quit without notice, I stayed late to finish his reports, out of guilt, not ambition. The next morning, my boss, Marion Foster, called me into her office. "You did these?" she asked, flipping through the printouts. I nodded, expecting criticism. Instead, she smiled. You've got an eye for detail, most people don't. Don't waste it. That was the first time anyone saw potential in me. Marianne became my mentor. She was sharp, no nonsense, but kind in ways that didn't require words. She'd say things like, if you want something you've never had, you've got to learn what you've never known. So I did. I spent nights studying spreadsheets and market trends. I watched online business lectures while eating microwaved noodles at 2 a.m. I learned the language of contracts, budgets, negotiation. Slowly, I started to believe I wasn't the extra piece of anyone's puzzle. I was building my own. By 28, I earned a promotion, project coordinator. It wasn't glamorous, but the day I bought a secondhand car, I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, crying and laughing at once. Freedom had a sound. It was the soft click of my key in the ignition. When Marianne retired 2 years later, she left me her desk plant, a tiny jade tree, and whispered, "You're going to do more than I ever did." She was right. 3 years after that, I launched Dawson Logistics and Consulting from a small rented office with one desk, one laptop, and one goal: to never depend on anyone who made me feel small again. The early days were brutal. I pitched clients who ignored me, faced contracts that fell apart, and spent nights staring at spreadsheets wondering if I'd made a mistake. But then came the first client, a small manufacturing company that trusted me to manage their export chain. The deal was worth only $9,000, but I remember shaking as I signed it. My hands still smelled faintly of printer ink and cheap coffee, but I felt unstoppable. That small win snowballed. One client became 5, 5 became 15. I hired my first employee, then a team. Every milestone was quiet. I didn't post much online, no bragging, no glossy success stories. My family still thought I worked in some office. I let them. It was easier than explaining that their disappointment had become the fuel for everything I built. Now, when I look around my glass-walled office, the skyline stretching beyond, I can still hear Grandma Nora's voice, grow quietly. And I did. Until the world couldn't ignore it anymore. The message from Dad, "You're not invited. Only family," lingered in my mind for days. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd moved on. But when I learned what the family gathering was, a farewell dinner for Ethan, who was back from London after a rough few years, as Linda put it, something in me twisted. Rough few years. The same brother I'd emptied my savings for. So when Ethan reached out, his voice awkward, a little too polite, I agreed to meet. "Come by the office," I told him. "We'll talk there." They all came together. Dad, Linda, and Ethan. I watched from the window as their car pulled up, sleek and unfamiliar with the downtown streets. The lobby of Dawson Logistics and Consulting was quiet, bathed in warm afternoon light. The polished marble floors reflected their hesitation as they stepped inside. My receptionist, in her crisp navy suit, greeted them with the kind of professionalism I'd once dreamed of being worthy of. "Miss Dawson will be with you shortly." Their eyes widened at the Miss Dawson. I could almost hear the gears turning. When I finally walked out, heels clicking against marble, the silence that followed was priceless. Ethan was the first to speak. "Wait, you work here?" I smiled, steady, calm.
No, Ethan.
"I don't work here. I own it." Dad blinked. His mouth opened, then closed. Linda shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the space, the framed awards on the wall, the glass conference room, the panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. I gestured for them to follow me into my office. Sunlight spilling over the curved walnut desk, the jade plant from Marion still thriving by the window. No one spoke. They were too busy processing what years of silence had built. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. You started this?" "I did." My voice was even. 5 years ago, when you said I needed to learn to be independent, I did exactly that." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't know you were doing so well." "How could you?" I said gently. "No one ever asked." For a long moment, no one moved. The air between us felt heavy, full of all the words we never said. Then Linda broke the silence. Claire, we didn't mean. Didn't mean what? I cut in, my tone still calm, but sharp as glass. Didn't mean to call me a burden? Didn't mean to tell Dad I just wanted attention? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I took a slow breath. You all taught me something valuable. That sometimes family doesn't cheer for you, they test you. And I passed every test. I opened the portfolio on my desk and slid it across to them. The company's annual report, profit margins in the millions. Dad's eyes scanned the numbers, disbelief flickering into something like guilt. You built all this alone, he murmured. Not alone, I said softly. With people who believed in me, just not the ones I expected. No one spoke after that. Even Ethan, usually so confident, just stared at the floor. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence linger, not as revenge, but as truth settling in. You said I wasn't family, I said finally, voice low, steady. Turns out I didn't need to be. I just needed to remember who I was. Outside, the city moved on, cars, sirens, life. Inside, the weight of years shifted. And for the first time, my father looked at me, really looked, not as the daughter who fell short, but as the woman who rose higher than he ever imagined. The room was still. My family's faces hovered between awe and guilt, and I realized something. The power had shifted. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally held the truth in my hands, the truth of my worth, my sweat, my independence. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished walnut desk, letting them feel the weight of my presence. I can help you, I began softly, but it will be on my terms. Dad swallowed, nodding slowly. We understand. No, I said. You don't. Let me be clear. I took a deep breath and outlined my conditions. 1, Ethan. You'll repay the $10,534 I gave you, not just because it was money, but because you need to understand responsibility. You'll also work in my company for 6 months. Real work. Real accountability. And yes, I will oversee it. He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. No excuses. This is about growth, not punishment. 2, Dad. You must stop measuring love through favoritism. You will attend family counseling with me, or you will see less of us. The people you keep hurting are not going to shrink themselves for your comfort anymore. Dad's eyes glistened, but I didn't soften. He needed to hear it. 3, Linda. You will acknowledge the ways you dismissed me, not with words, but with action. You will volunteer with a charity or mentor someone struggling. You will show kindness where you previously saw competition. They all looked shocked, almost intimidated by the calmness of my voice. But I wasn't angry. I was steady. I was fairness incarnate. I'm offering you a choice, I said. You can step into this with honesty, humility, and effort, or you can step back. Your comfort is not my responsibility anymore. My generosity is not your entitlement. Silence stretched. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his pride meeting my resolve. Dad's jaw tightened, and Linda fiddled with her necklace as if searching for a hidden excuse. I softened just a fraction, allowing warmth to seep into my words. I care about you, I said. I really do. But caring doesn't mean letting you walk over me, or ignoring the past. This is about rebuilding, with truth, with boundaries. Their expressions flickered. Disbelief, shame, recognition, and finally, a hint of hope. I stood and walked toward the window, letting the sunlight touch my face. My reflection showed a woman who had endured, grown, and now commanded her life with clarity. You wanted family, I said quietly, almost to myself. Well, here I am. But family doesn't mean erasing your mistakes. It means being willing to grow together. Are you ready for that? No one answered immediately, but I knew the seed had been planted. For the first time, they were being asked to step up, not for me, but for themselves. And in that moment, I realized something essential. I didn't need them to acknowledge my success to validate it. I needed them to acknowledge their own growth, and I could guide them there. Months passed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, I watched the changes unfold. Ethan began repaying the $10,534 I'd given him. More than the money, it was the way he carried himself differently now, with accountability, not entitlement. He asked questions, listened, and admitted mistakes. I caught him smiling at small successes, proud without needing praise from anyone else. Dad started showing up in subtle ways. He called just to ask how I was, not to criticize or assert authority. Once, he stopped by the office with coffee in hand, hesitant but sincere. He said, "I didn't see it before. I'm trying now." I nodded, letting the words sink. That was enough. Linda, surprisingly, began volunteering at a local mentoring program. I learned of it when one of the ments mentioned how patient and encouraging she was. A small victory, but a visible one, proof she was learning that family didn't have to be a battlefield. Through it all, I kept the silver bracelet Grandma Nora gave me on my wrist. Every morning, I looked at it, remembering her words, "Never measure your worth by who sees it. Build quietly, and the right people will notice." I had built. They had noticed. But the real power was in how I chose to respond. One quiet evening, I sat in my office with the city lights spilling across the floor. I sipped my tea, reflecting on the journey. The nights of fear, the sting of rejection, the tears no one saw. And yet, here I was, stronger, steady, and unafraid. Family had always meant expectation and disappointment for me. But now it meant growth, accountability, and the kind of love that comes from respect. I picked up the jade plant Marianne had given me. It had grown tall and resilient, just like me. I smiled, remembering her voice. I whispered, softly, almost to the city beyond the glass walls. They told me I wasn't family. They tried to keep me small. But I learned that family isn't just what you're born into. It's what you build, protect, and nurture.
And
I built it my way. The lights outside flickered, cars honked in the distance, life continued. And I felt it, deeply. The calm power of a woman who had endured, risen, and chosen grace over bitterness. For the first time in years, I was free and truly at home in my own life.